Dear listeners, today we're thrilled to give a special shout out to the incredibly talented Ronald Burns. This is his second story that he has shared with us, and we can't wait for you to experience the magic of his words. If you enjoyed Ronald's story, be sure to explore more of his literature on Amazon. We've added links to his work in the description box below, so you can easily dive into his captivating storytelling. Sending loads of love to Ronald Burns for his contribution, and to all our listeners, thank you for being part of this literary journey with us. And if you want to share your work with us, please send your work at the email mentioned in the description box, and we will publish it for our listeners at Lost Love Chronicles. Now let's get on with the story. I never outgrew my childhood fascination and admiration for Zorro. Though I was born a skinny, unathletic geek, I worshipped his fearless bravado and his skill with a bullwhip. I wished I could be like him. In reality, I wasn't even as cool as Don Diego. Now at age 23, I was at the back of a long line to gain entry to Comic-Con, a yearly comic book convention in San Diego. I had taken the train down from Los Angeles. The train was filled with at least 100 people in various costumes from every movie and TV show you could imagine. At the convention center, I stood in the ticket line behind a couple dressed as Superman and Supergirl, and in front of Enid, a girl dressed as Princess Leia in a slave costume that showcased an amazing body. The only thing inauthentic about her costume was that she was a blonde and a hell of a lot prettier than Carrie Fisher, who I thought was also gorgeous. I was of course dressed as Zorro, complete with a long leather bullwhip and a Zorro-styled hat, mask and cape. Princess Leia asked me how long I thought the line was. 2 parsecs, I answered to her laughter. In the movie Star Wars, Han Solo claims that a parsec is a measurement of speed, when in reality it measures distance. This Princess Leia knew the difference. In the 2 hours that it took us in line to enter Enid, and I got to know a lot about each other. At Comic-Con, everyone takes photos of everyone else, and we enjoyed posing for people. We spent the whole day together at the convention, and that night we took the train back to Los Angeles together along with hundreds of other convention attendees, most of whom were in one sort of costume or another. We sat between Jedi Knights and Stormtroopers, as I pretended to try and arrange a truce between them. We were exhausted and Enid fell asleep with her head on my shoulder. Enid worked at the UCLA Graduate Research Library. I was a nerd working on an MBA in computer sciences at UCLA, and this was the most sexually arousing moment in my life. I never wanted that train ride to end, because I didn't believe I could have a future with a girl this pretty and wonderful. Enid slept until the train stopped at Union Station. When she awoke, she said that being in the arms of a man as brave and strong as Zorro made her feel safe enough to fall asleep. Then she kissed me on my cheek. I was in heaven. She suggested that we meet for lunch at the UCLA cafeteria on Tuesday, after we recovered from this weekend. I was so elated that I couldn't mouth the word yes, but could only nod my head. We left the station and walked hand in hand to our cars in the parking lot. We dated, married, and had children. During one of our moves to a new house, about 10 years later, my Zorro outfit was lost, which didn't bother my wife, but broke my heart. My wife said it was a sign that it was time for me to grow up. I disagreed. I'm a responsible adult, father to my 2 sons and husband with a full-time job. So what if I like to dress up as Zorro occasionally? Once, I tried to have closeness with my wife while I was dressed as Zorro, but her laughter ruined the mood. People sometimes call me immature and say I've never grown up. They may mean it as an insult, but I always take it as a compliment. Who the hell wants to grow up? Once you're old enough to drive and drink, nothing good comes with age except Social Security, Medicare, and in my family, arthritis and back pain. I think my rampant immaturity was what initially attracted my wife to me. It certainly wasn't my money, since I had none. Now, I made a good living, but I still didn't earn a fortune working as the regional manager of the Geek Squad at Best Buy. But I could always make her laugh until recently. My wife was a pharmaceutical rep and often traveled for business, or at least she said it was business. Every day she dealt with wealthy doctors, and I was insecure. I could feel us drifting apart. When I mentioned it, she shut my mouth with a kiss, ending my concerns temporarily. Up until my late 20s, I was still cute. Now, over 40, I was so average looking that I was practically invisible with my receding gray hairline. My wife, on the other hand, grew prettier each year after her 20s. Now in her early 40s, she was a knockout who still took my breath away, and apparently that of her best friend's husband, Mr. Charles Sands. Charlie was 10 years younger than I was, with a full head of hair and muscles on muscles. Our 2 families went on a Labor Day picnic together, and I could see there was a spark between them that they took no effort to hide. Charlie's wife Estelle also noticed this and commented, in a way that made it seem she was kidding, that we'd better keep an eye on those two. It was clear that she wasn't kidding. Charlie was a partner in a gym, and it was obvious that his muscles were bigger than my muscles and also bigger than his brain. He was also always trying to one-up me. The week after I bought a 45-inch TV, he bought one that was 54 inches. The week after I bought a Toyota Corolla, he bought a Toyota Camry. My wife recently commented with a faraway look in her eyes that I should work out in a gym like Charlie. Charlie can do at least 50 push-ups, can you? No, but unlike Charlie, I can count to 10 without using my fingers. You and Charlie were getting too close at the picnic, and it made me uncomfortable. I want us to take a break from Charlie and his family for a few months. My wife gave me a kiss and told me I had nothing to worry about. I felt better. I trusted my wife, but like President Reagan once said, trust, but verify. Then she added that she wouldn't allow me to tell her what to do, who to see, or control her in any way. I knew I was in trouble. A week later on a Tuesday, at exactly 11 a.m., my newly installed home Ring doorbell camera notified my cell phone at work that someone was at my front door. It was good old Charlie. My wife opened the door and they disappeared inside. I immediately told my staff that I was taking an early lunch and drove home. I didn't know what to do when I got there that wouldn't land me in prison, or since Charlie was a lot stronger than I was, a hospital. I decided to be subtle. I gave Charlie's car 4 flat tires and drove back to work. I figured that if he had half a brain, he would get the message and leave my wife alone. Apparently, I was overly optimistic about his brain. My wife gave no clues that anything untoward was going on. She wasn't that passionate in bed, but then she rarely was in the past few months. I checked her phone and found no incriminating evidence, and I'm an expert at checking a smartphone. It's part of my job. When I checked her closet, I did find some new sexy red bras and panties that were never worn for my pleasure. I tried to take her away for a romantic weekend in Santa Barbara to rekindle the spark, but she claimed that she had too much work. I told her we needed this weekend together because our marriage was about to fall off a cliff. She didn't relent. I was devastated. What would my hero, Zorro, do? Halloween was quickly approaching, so I went to a costume store and bought a Zorro outfit. I never showed the costume to my wife or children. That week, when home alone, I'd venture into my large backyard and put on my costume and play with my bullwhip. I drew 2 parallel lines about 6 inches apart with a magic marker on a telephone pole. Standing about 10 feet away, I practiced until I could wrap the bullwhip around the pole between the 2 lines 10 out of 10 times. I guess it's like riding a bike. You never forget how. Some angry men use a punching bag to release tension. I used a bullwhip to let off steam when life dealt me a bad hand or a cheating wife. I didn't know what to do. I tried to channel my inner Zorro. Again, I asked myself, what would Zorro do? One thing was for sure, he wouldn't take this lying down. He was a man of action, and that's what I had to be. I was already angry, now I was getting excited. The next Tuesday, again at 11 a.m., Charlie was again at my front door in the pouring rain. I superglued the door locks and windshield wipers of his ancient pickup truck. Surely, he would now understand the situation. He didn't. Of course, my wife had a headache that night and wasn't in the mood. Neither was I in the mood to sleep with a woman who had just slept with a gym rat who probably slept with a dozen other women this year. His body, and now hers, was a petri dish of germs and diseases, none of which I wanted to catch. I know I should have confronted her, but I couldn't. I knew if I started the conversation I would break down in tears, and I refused to do that in front of her. I was doing enough crying while I was alone. That night, my wife told me she was leaving for a girls' night out with her friends on Saturday, which was Halloween. In my gut, I knew what this meant. Though I knew that my marriage was over, I did need my revenge. I may be a nerd, but I was a spiteful, vengeful nerd. Even though I was tempted, I would never harm my wife. But Charlie Boy was a different story. I was about to explode with a thermonuclear blast of anger that destroyed the mild, nice guy I used to be. I hatched a plan worthy of my hero Zorro. I secretly bought for cash a black electric bike capable of 25 miles an hour, which is about as fast as you can drive a car most times in our city. The bike cost a lot less than a private investigator. My wife was dressed as Little Red Riding Hood for her girls' night out Halloween party. My wife didn't want me to know where she was going. She knew how technologically adept I was, so she left her cell phone and car at home and got a ride with a friend. She may have suspected that I planted a GPS tracker in her car, which I had. She was pretty smart. I wore 2 shirts and 2 pairs of pants. The outer ones were black, in keeping with my Zorro disguise. With my whip, cape, mask and Zorro hat stored in my saddlebag, I followed my wife's friend's car that Saturday night on my new bike, which I named Tornado. Tornado was also the name of Zorro's horse. I would have preferred the name Diablo, but you don't argue with Zorro, the fox. Traffic was so bad I had to slow down on my bike so as not to overtake her friend's car. My anger and pain were turning into excitement as the moment of truth drew near. They walked inside a cheaters bar in a seedy part of Santa Monica. I parked my bike, and while I waited, I put on my Zorro mask and costume. Sure enough, 2 minutes later, Charlie, dressed as the big bad wolf, parked his car and walked towards the bar with his back towards me. My body tingled with excitement as I untangled and placed the whip behind me, spread my feet apart for balance, then with all my strength swung my whip as it loudly cracked and wrapped itself around Charlie's neck. With all my might, I yanked it back, and he went tumbling backwards to the ground, clutching his throat. I know it wasn't a fair fight, but I believe that if you're in a fair fight, it just means your tactics are wrong, especially if your adversary is a weightlifter who could pound you into dust. I walked up to him, released my whip from his neck, and as he chocked and tried to catch his breath, I punched him in his solar plexus. Then I kicked him in the ribs hard enough to break a few. He was struggling to breath. Then I kicked him between his legs. I wanted to make sure he wouldn't be intimate with my wife for quite a while. As he lay there writhing in pain, I took a black indelible magic marker from my pocket with my left hand, and I drew a large Z on his forehead. It would take him at least a week to scrub it off. I know it was silly and immature, but it was the greatest, most thrilling moment in my boring, Mr. Nice Guy life. I had my vengeance for being made a cuck. I was in fact a bold renegade, just like TV's Zorro, Guy Williams. I didn't say a word, so he couldn't identify me by my voice. I had released 2 months of nonstop pain he had caused me in less than 1 minute. I had back my pride and self-respect and, surprisingly, my sense of humor. I laughed my ass off as I walked swiftly back to my bike and rode off into the night where the full moon was bright, singing to myself the theme song from the 1950s TV show. I was just like Zorro, who made the sign of the Z. It broke my heart to throw my magic marker, whip, mask, hat, outer black pants, black shirt, and cape away in several different dumpsters on the way home. I couldn't have incriminating evidence in my house. I parked the bike a few blocks away, wiped away my fingerprints, and didn't lock it. I knew it would be stolen within an hour. I replaced the Ring doorbell with a conventional one, so no one could prove I even knew about the affair. I played dumb as my wife screamed, "I know it was you," at me when she returned home. She ran up to our bedroom, packed a suitcase, cursing me the whole time, and left. The next morning, 4 police officers showed up at my house with a search warrant. The slim, cute female cop, with blonde hair and a pixie cut straight out of the 1950s and about 10 years younger than me, read out loud that the warrant gave them permission to look for a bullwhip, black cape, black mask, black hat, pants, shirt, and black electric bike. Then she broke up in laughter. I joined her in laughter and asked if this was a joke, and if they were really cops, and if one of them was named Sergeant Garcia. They were too young to know who Garcia was, unless, like they watched old TV shows on cable. I asked if we were on some reality TV show as I searched for a camera crew. They did only a cursory search and then left apologizing to me. The female cop was named Laura according to the card she gave me. She never stopped laughing. She tried to engage me in conversation about my whereabouts the night before. Then she asked if I knew that my wife was cheating on me. I sat there silently with my mouth wide open as if I was flabbergasted. I didn't fall for her trap. A cop is a cop is a cop all the time. Most criminals can't keep their mouths shut and talk their way into jail. Just ask Martha Stewart. By the end of the week, I received the divorce papers from my wife and a temporary restraining order preventing me from being within 500 feet of my wife and Charlie. She earned about 20% more than I did, so I wouldn't pay alimony. Since she often traveled for work, I received primary custody of our teenage children and a little bit of child support. I felt bad that I couldn't reveal the truth to Charlie's wife about her husband and my wife. It didn't matter. Charlie and my wife ran off together and stayed madly in love with one another for almost 6 months and then broke up. I never learned why, but I can imagine how faithful 2 cheaters would be to one another. Or maybe while holding his hands and fingers behind his back, she asked him to count to 11. I phoned Laura, the cute police officer who served the search warrant, and asked her on a date. She sweetly and politely declined, but gave me the phone number of her older sister Adrienne, who was a legal secretary and liked to dress up as Batgirl for Halloween. On our first date, we discovered that we both loved the Three Stooges, Pee Wee Herman and Jim Carrey. We also both loved operas. We agreed that we were the weirdest two people on Earth and must be meant for each other. Later, I dressed like John Steed with a bowler hat and cane, and Adrian as Emma Peel in a black patent leather leotard from the ancient TV show, The Avengers. We traveled to Comic-Con where I proposed to her. I couldn't risk dressing as Zorro, because the statute of limitations had not yet run out on my crime of attacking my ex-wife's lover, and we were there with Adrian's cop sister. In fact, Laura asked if I wouldn't rather dress up as Zorro. I pretended I didn't know what she was talking about. A year later, Adrian and I were married at Comic-Con dressed as Batman and Batgirl. My sons were dressed as the Joker and the Riddler. Adrian's sister, Laura, the cop as matron of honor, was dressed as Catwoman. When Adrian and I celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary, Laura, now Detective Laura, pulled me aside. She said the statute of limitation had run, and I could safely tell her if I was Zorro on that Halloween night. You want to know if I'm that bold renegade who carved a Z with a black magic marker? I knew it. We never made public the information about the black Z on his forehead. She responded with the largest smile I had ever seen. You didn't have to. It was the talk of the town. I said to cover my ass. She walked over to her husband who was joking with Adrian. Laura put her arm around her husband and warned him to stop flirting with Zorro's wife. He was confused, but since my wife knew the whole story, she nodded in agreement with her sister. A week later, Laura came to our house and handed me a box with a new black cape, a black hat, black mask, and a bullwhip. That night, I wore just the cape and mask as I made love to my wife. At the moment of climax, Adrian pulled off my mask and yelled out in faked amazement as she crossed herself, "Santa Maria, you're really Don Diego." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.